It's the first week of April, and that means it's time to talk about some absolutely insane Dungeons & Dragons lore. Today, we're talking about the GORBEL, a creature who is simultaneously obscure and forgotten, but also extremely well documented, which is a very rare occurrence in a game like D&D. Eagle-eyed viewers might notice that this creature kinda looks like a beholder if it took up eating glue. And that's not entirely wrong. Originating in the good old Fiend folio for 1st edition D&D, the GORBEL has some of the funniest art in this entire book. I genuinely love the old art spreads from this era of the game a lot, but there is just something about the vacant stare of this three-eyed goobus contrasted with the abject terror of the man it's latching onto that hits exactly right for me. It would return in 2nd edition as part of the Fiend folio compendium appendix, where it gets yet another stellar piece of artwork. While much more detailed than the last one, the stockiness of its legs really give the GORBEL here such a special quality. But what the hell even is this thing? Well, like the Deathkiss, Gazer, or Spectator, the GORBEL is a beholderkin, a creature that is related to, but not a beholder. They are small creatures who drift through the air, though unlike true beholders, they don't have a bunch of devastating magic potential lurking behind their eyes. Instead, they have 2 claws, which, as the Fiend folio image so helpfully demonstrates, can dig into just about anything or anyone. Once a GORBEL has latched onto its target, according to the book, it's nearly impossible to wrench it off. So you just kind of end up with this floating ball of eye stalks clawing into you until either it dies or you do. The GORBEL flies around by controlling a helium-like gas within its body. It's got several valves that allow it to let off gas in order to push it in any direction. This is kind of a fun little detail, but it also has 2 major implications. The first being that according to its original lore entry, the gases exhausted by a GORBEL smell like sulfur and rotten eggs, which not only means that this is a D&D monster who uses farts to navigate, the smell produced by a GORBEL usually gives its presence away long before the creature is spotted. The second thing you need to know about this is that the gases kept inside the creature are crazy flammable and will ignite when they make contact with oxygen, meaning that when a GORBEL dies, it explodes into a ball of fire. So while this goofy looking beach ball of a monster latching onto someone in the party might seem kinda funny at first, it becomes a lot more serious when you realize that the thing hanging onto the fighter's back is more or less a living grenade. Now, aside from the 2 monster books I mentioned already, the GORBEL would appear in a few other places over the years, mostly in random encounter tables present in adventure or setting books, which is how we know, canonically, GORBELs can be found in the sewers of Waterdeep. They would also get a brief mention in the AD&D monster lore book about beholders, I, Tyrant, which is not only a hilarious title for a book about beholders, but also contains straight up misinformation. In I, Tyrant, on page 17, there is a short entry with some information on beholder versions, including the GORBEL. To quote the source material directly, this sad sack of the beholderkin races looks much like a beholder. However, its eye stalks possess no special abilities and actually end in claws, which is just straight up incorrect. But beyond that, there just wasn't enough interest to print the GORBEL anywhere else, is what I thought. But it turns out that they managed to sneak their way into an issue of Dragon magazine right before 3rd edition was released. In the April 2000 issue of Dragon magazine, the GORBEL were given a full-on ecology article spanning 7 pages, including multiple pieces of brand new artwork, a diagram of the creature's physiology, and a bunch of new information. The Ecology of the GORBEL, Full of Hot Air, was written by Jonathan M. Richards, and the bulk of it is a short story about a group of monster hunters hired to save the countryside from mutant killer beholders. The story itself is pretty fun, and we get all these splash images of the GORBEL mixed throughout, which are great. I especially love this one on page 83 of a GORBEL exploding while one of the characters looks on with an expression I can only describe as ruh-roh. But it's not just fluff. There are a ton of footnotes in here with some great information on these weird little freaks. Based on their intelligence score in the previous books, we know that GORBELs are kinda dumb, but this book gives us a more complete picture of just how dumb they are, which is hella. They're on the same level as most unintelligent beasts, and they are omnivorous, so they just kinda drift around and consume whatever they can get their grubby little paws on. Much like the noble Brontosaurus, they move in herds, which means encountering one typically leads to another and another, and because they're not immune to the explosions of their kin, if they happen to be traveling as a large group and one of them detonates, there's a pretty good chance for a chain reaction to trigger and cause all of them to explode. However, We also learn from this article that Gorbels reproduce asexually with little pods that are housed inside of their bodies, and when they explode, it essentially activates these little podlings who will be scattered throughout the area like seeds, and after a few days, form the next generation of Gorbel. This article also gives us some insight into how the Gorbel interact with the world around them, and some of the most insane shit I've ever heard when it comes to how people have tried to weaponize them, which I will get into in a minute here. But it needs to be stated just how unlikely it is for this article to actually exist in the first place. The 3rd edition D&D core rulebooks came out in August of 2000, which was only 4 months after this article saw print, and the Gorbel were never officially converted into 3rd edition or 3.5, so the fact that they were given a multi-page spread like this with tons of new information and artwork is absolutely insane. Though it was the April edition, and as we all know, the April issue of Dragon Magazine is where all the heat is at when it comes to unhinged articles and insane D&D monsters, and some of the strangest world building you can find. Speaking of world building, I gotta give a massive shout out to this week's sponsor, World Anvil. Bet you didn't see that coming. If you haven't heard of World Anvil by now, let me lift up that rock you must be under and show you what's up. World Anvil is an amazing toolkit for GMs and players alike with tons of features to help you manage your D&D campaign. It's got interactive maps and tools for building your own setting, or simply organizing the one that you're playing in. It's got a massive library of stat blocks for over 100 TTRPGs, and it gives you the tools to create and organize stat blocks for yourself. If you're a GM, you can even set up a campaign world and choose which parts of it your players get to see, so that way you can keep all of your secrets safe and well organized with a convenient way to share information to those players when the time is right. And thanks to features like automatic linking, family trees, and timelines, you can spend more time actually creating cool ideas for your campaign and less time digging through binders stuffed to the gills with scraggled campaign notes. I swear that sometimes I can't even read my own handwriting, so if you're like me in that regard, this might be something you want to check out. Right now, World Anvil is offering Dungeon Dad viewers 51% off their yearly subscription with code DungeonDad. So if you want to see for yourself how World Anvil can help you up your GMing game, head over to the link down below and start exploring for yourself. Thank you once more to World Anvil for bringing us here to talk about the goofy goober that is the Gorbel. Speaking of which, let's talk turkey. And by turkey, I mean meat. And by meat, I mean stats. The Gorbel is not exactly a high CR creature. In 5e, it clocks in with a CR of 1/2, which puts it in the extremely rare group of monsters I've covered on this channel that have a CR below 1. Their stat block is not super complicated, as you can imagine, but it is very fun. Their only action is to make a claw attack, and if that hits you, you're grappled big time. I gave them what is essentially expertise in grappling, so the DC to escape their grab is a 15, which is crazy high for a CR 1/2 monster. They also have a bite, which they can do as a bonus action, though it only targets a creature being grappled by them. I also made this bite attack a saving throw instead of an attack roll because I like the visual that it creates of someone flailing around to try and avoid being bitten by this thing while it's got their claws dug into them. I also gave it a spicy little reaction called Struggle, where if you do manage to yank this thing off of your buddy, it can immediately try to grab back on. It's definitely still possible to break free, but it's not gonna be easy, and of course I gave it the death burst trait as seen on the gas spore and all the mephits, so that when it dies, it does so in a great ball of fire. Something else worth noting is that Gorbels have rubbery skin that makes them immune to bludgeoning damage, so if you smack one of these things with a mace or a quarterstaff or a baseball bat, it's just gonna bounce right off and probably make a sound akin to punting a dodgeball. And that's really all there is to talk about when it comes to their actual mechanics. However, I did promise to fill you in on some deeply cursed lore about these things, and I intend to uphold my end of the bargain. In the short story written for their ecology article, a bunch of townsfolk see these Gorbels in their fields chowing down on their crops, and immediately the townsfolk go into panic mode because they think that this is a herd of beholders. I mean, these people have probably never seen a beholder before, but they know the legends and the stories, so they immediately run off to tell the marshal, who then goes to ask the monster hunters from the local guild for help. At first, the monster hunters are like, dude, you said how many beholders? A dozen? We'll get murdered for sure. But then one of them has a thought and is pretty much positive that what is being described is not a pack of beholders because that doesn't match their behavior and it's probably something else. So they take the job and go off to deal with the beholders. Long story short, they kill them all, not without incident mind you, and they tell the townsfolk that they're safe from the beholders now, never actually telling them what the creatures were, and of course, collecting a massive reward as the heroes who save the town by cutting down a dozen beholders. Truly iconic party behavior. However, in the footnotes, it explains that people have tried with varying degrees of success to harness Gorbels in the past as a resource. Their hides, apparently, make for great armor, but they are especially useful for crafting balloons which can contain gas. So if you wanted to build, say, an airship or a hot air balloon, harvesting the hides of God knows how many Gorbels might be an option. The problem is, of course, that when a Gorbel dies, it explodes, but there is a solution to the problem, and it's super f***ed up. Originally, rules as written, the Gorbel only explodes if it is killed by piercing or slashing damage from a weapon, or any kind of damage caused by spells. And since they're immune to bludgeoning damage, that's basically just all damage, right? Well, no, it does leave a window for mundane poison and effects like blood loss. So in the article, it suggests that a good way to harvest the hide of a Gorbel is to throw a net over them to capture them and either kill them with poison or cut off their eye stalks so that way the eyes can be harvested and the creature, of course, will bleed to death. And yeah, I guess you could do that. But also, what do you even mean by this? Something else I should mention is that the gas within these creatures is apparently a very valuable reagent for making potions of fire breathing or anything else that requires explosive vapor. And because the gas is what makes them float, if you slay a Gorbel by letting it bleed out, you can tie a string around it and carry it around like a balloon until it starts to degrade, which usually happens after about 2 days. See, when I criticize the new monster manuals for not containing enough lore, this is the kind of stuff I'm talking about. Anyway, this all just makes me think of a Cruella de Vil-esque villain who is just out here trying to collect 10,000 Gorbel hides to fuel the creation of a new super Zeppelin or something. Also, it needs to be said, all of that, including the balloon thing, is in the article. And another thing mentioned by the article is what can only be described as a straight up war crime, which is taking captive Gorbels and fastening them to catapult ammunition, so that when you are laying siege to an enemy's fortress, when the boulders thrown by your siege engine smashes against the wall, they'll explode. It even goes as far as to say that if they don't explode, that's okay, because now you can just fire an arrow at the Gorbel and it'll set it off. No worries. So while this creature may be kind of a silly little guy to encounter in a dungeon, or even a serious problem if a herd of them moves into town, never forget that you can also harness the power of the Gorbel to become a monster person. As per their lore, they are too dumb to speak. However, if you wanted to make one of these guys into an NPC, you could always just have a Gorbel with like a 7 in intelligence who is capable of speech and roll with it that way. Maybe after being trapped in a dungeon for who knows how long, it latches on to one of the party members, not to kill them, but to force them to help it escape, promising to let go when the party reaches the outdoors. Clearing the rest of the dungeon with a bomb strapped to your back might not be ideal, but I guess it's better than setting off a bomb right now. And who knows, if it survives and takes a liking to the party, maybe it'll stick around. But however you choose to use this monster, as always, linked in the description down below is my 5th edition conversion of this creature, which contains everything you will need to run this at your game table for free. And of course, also linked below is my Patreon page where you can find the high-res PDF stat block version of this monster, which contains all the same information, but a bit more fanciful presentation is my way of saying thank you so much to those of you who choose to throw a few extra dollars my way to help me keep on doing what I'm doing here. Speaking of patrons, it's time for Patron of the Week. Thank you so much to Dr. Beardface for your prescriptive amount of support, and thank you for watching. As always, if there's a monster from an older edition of D&D, Pathfinder, some other role-playing game, or whatever that you would like to see show up in a future episode of Monster of the Week, let me know in the comments down below, or in the Dungeon Dad Discord in the Creatures Suggestions channel, which is also linked down below. And who knows? Maybe it'll show up at some point in the future. I had a ton of fun researching this creature. It ended up being more in depth than I thought it was gonna be, and I've been so stoked to talk about it since I first discovered it like a year or 2 ago. So I hope you had a fun time watching this. As is tradition, this is our first video for April, so kind of a goofy monster. And I don't know, next week we got something crazy on the way. Not in the sense of it being a silly gooby guy, but in the sense that it's gonna probably be a dragon. But anyways, we'll build that bridge when we get there. Thank you so much for watching. That's all I got for you this week. Until the next one.